chief guest is an outstanding member of the IAS fraternity and has a very creative mind from what one reads from his CV. At present, as you know, he is the CEO of NITI Aayog, which represents National Institute for Transformation of India. Which is the new incarnation of the Planning Commission. And among other tasks, the Prime Minister has asked him to draft a short-term and a long-term vision of India in the development. He is the author of Branding India. He is a very creative personality. And all the brands you read about have been coined by him. Incredible Story, Incredible India, Made in India, Startup India. To start with, he was with the Kerala government tourist department and has done a lot of creative work to make Kerala one of the favorite destinations in India. And coined a very fine name which all the stakeholders were asked to use to great advantage, God's country. And I believe it has caught on well. He helped develop a public partnership for a private airport, Calicut, and all the other facilities, infrastructure for tourism. He had a lot of film under his stewardship of the tourism department. But more important has been that because of his creative mind, he has been given very challenging assignments in India. Because of my close association with Japan, I know what a key role he has played in the Delhi-Mumbai Industrial Corridor, which has been on and which he was on till very recently. Now that he's gone on to NITI Aayog, the task has been entrusted to somebody else. But that's a Herculean task, one of the largest bilateral relationship between two countries, with a huge amount of capital investment in the form of loans from Japan to India and technical collaboration as well. I think the most important part of this development will be the development of the whole horizon, as is done in Japan. If you have been to Japan and if you've seen between Tokyo and all the other allied localities, how they've been developed into one condominium. And the smart city concept which we have seen was also undertaken by him. And this Delhi-Bombay corridor, as it gets off the ground, you will have the catalytic effect of having smart cities throughout India in various clusters, and will be a fillip to urbanization. Urbanization on modernistic lines and not haphazard urbanization as we had in the past. He has a background of economics academically and has been exposed to the Harvard University management courses at Harvard, conducted by Harvard University and the IIM Amitabh. But more important has been his jobs on the spot. The Delhi-Bombay corridor is one part. The other part was the Secretary to the Department of Industrial Policy and Promotion, where he was assigned for a number of years. And now this NITI Aayog, which I think is perhaps one of the most important and challenging roles he has been asked and assigned. He is a recipient of several awards, including the Economic Times Award Change Agent of the Year Award, Globe Award 2016 for Leadership in Transforming Governance for the 20th Century, what he is going to speak us today. He is also a distinguished fellow of the Institute of Directors. He is eminently qualified to address us this evening on challenges of transforming India. I give you this.
Mr. Sampath, distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen, It's a great pleasure and an honor for me to deliver the A.D. Shroff Memorial Lecture here today. Mr. A.D. Shroff was a visionary in many, many ways. He was a man ahead of his time, a man of great vision, great outlook, great perspective, and a man who's built the Indians' industrial sector and the financing of India's industrial sector in many remarkable manner. He was instrumental in the creation of the Investment Bank of India, later the ICICI. And I think the best testimony to his vision and outlook is the fact that the government of India, the Prime Minister, has decided to do away with the planning process now. The National Institution of Transforming India is actually been asked to lay down a 15 years vision for the country, a 7-year strategic plan, and a 3-year action plan. And this in many ways converges, integrates, and coincides with the perspective that Mr. A.D. Shroff had of a 15-year vision plan for India. And that's why he was a person, that's why I thought, my view is that he was ahead of time, because at that particular point of India's history, he said that the government's role should be very minimal, and that private sector has a very critical and a very major role to play, and the government is there to aid and assist the private sector in creating wealth. So I'm particularly honored and delighted to be here and to deliver this A.D. Shroff Memorial Lecture in memory of a man who was ahead of his time, a man who was a man of immense perspective, outlook, and shaped India's growth process in many ways. Ladies and gentlemen, India is growing at 7.5% per annum. It's an oasis of growth in the midst of a very, very barren economic landscape across the world. But the challenge for India is to grow at rates of 9 to 10% per annum, year after year, for 3 decades or more, to be able to lift a very young population above the poverty line. India is passing through a window of demographic transition, which rarely happens in history. 72% of our population is below the age of 32. And this, to my mind, is the biggest social and economic transition that is taking place across the world. That the population in India is getting younger and younger, and the population across Europe and America is getting older, and Indian population will keep getting younger till 2040, and it's rarely in history that when you have such light dependency burden that a country doesn't progress. And this is always, when you pass through such transition, demographic transition, these are periods of very unique transition and transformation. Just to give you an example, when Mubarak took power in Egypt in 1960, the average age was just around 44, 45. And the infant mortality rate was 353 out of 1,000. But by the time he was thrown out of power in 2011, the age to which man survived in Egypt had grown, had risen to about almost 79. And from 44 to 79 in that span of 44, 45 years. And the infant mortality rate had fallen from 353 to just 21 out of 1,000. And Mubarak just couldn't grasp it. And the young population, when it just threw him out of power and couldn't grasp the radical changes that were taking place in Egypt, and the Arab Spring took over. And therefore, when you have a young population, these are periods of very radical transformation. And the challenge for India is not merely to grow rapidly, but also to create jobs for its very young population. And therefore, what are the challenges when India is trying to transform itself to a high rates of growth? What are the challenges for India? And I think the first and foremost is that we made India a very, very complex, very difficult and a very complicated place to do business in. India is has been one of the most complicated places to do business in. We have added a lot of rules, regulation, procedures, paperwork, year after year, year after year, year after year, and made it very difficult for private people to create wealth in society. And therefore, one of the key things of Mr. Modi when he came to power was 2 years back, that make India easy and simple. And so we've last 2 years, we scrapped close to about 1,587 acts we have scrapped. 1,587 acts have been scrapped. Now you can register a company in 1 day. A medium and small enterprise can actually do its registration in almost 2 to 3 minutes. It's a one-page form. Every single government has been asked to ensure that its form is in just 1 page. The rules are in 2 pages, and acts are not more than 4 to 5 pages. So for import and export, there were 11 and 9 forms. They have been brought down to just 3 forms. And a vast number of re-regulations have taken place across the board. And India has, on the ease of doing business of the World Bank, jumped up by 12 positions. But it's not that we need to improve for World Bank's sake. We need to improve for our own sake so that India can grow rapidly. So while the government of India has acted on a vast number of areas of growth to make India easy and simple, it's important to understand that India is a very large country. It's bigger than 24 countries of Europe, plus another 30,000 kilometers. So India actually can be made easy and simple only if our states become easy and simple. So while the central government was adding acts and rules, the state governments were also adding rules, regulations, procedures, paperwork. So you need to dismantle a lot of paperwork in states. Now, how do we do that? So one of the challenges was that how do we make our states easy and simple? So last year, we said we are going to make the states compete on ease of doing business. And we created about a 100 points index on which we said we will actually rank the states on ease of doing business. Now we said we'll name and shame the states. And last year, we did a ranking of the states across 100 points. And there was huge competition among states. And finally, that evaluation was done by a team from World Bank. And we said we'll put it out in public domain. So we put this list in public domain. Gujarat came number 1. Andhra came number 2. Maharashtra, Tamil Nadu, Karnataka, some of the best performing industrial states actually performed very badly. And they came out they performed very poorly on ease of doing business. And the mineral-rich states of Jharkhand and Chhattisgarh, they brought in a lot of reforms and they improved, they came 3rd and 4th. So the good thing was that the eastern part of India, which is very rich in mineral terms, they brought in huge reforms. And this year, we are doing this competition among states over 344 points. So our view is that, and states are competing in a very big way. And since Maharashtra had not performed well, this year Maharashtra has gone all out. Telangana has gone all out. Many states have gone all out, and I can assure you, ladies and gentlemen, that this year Gujarat will find it very difficult to come number 1. And many states have chief ministers are taking regular meetings, chief secretaries are taking regular meetings, and therefore, so that they are not shamed, and that they are, since this is all put in public domain, people must ask as to why states are not performing well. So I think we have challenged the states, and in a big way, and I think you will see a lot of improvement in ease of doing business across states simply because we have created a sense of competition. But my view is that if India is to grow at 9 to 10%, it will be very, very difficult for India to do that unless and until we don't improve on our social indices. If we don't improve on education and health, it will be very difficult. Because almost 41% of our children who are studying today are not able to read. A student of class 5 is not able to read class 2 book in his mother tongue. A class 5 student is not able to read, is not able to subtract and add in class 2. So while we've been able to provide access of education, the quality of education has fallen very badly in India, and we need to improve this in a very big way. And therefore, learning outcomes is critical if India has to grow. You can't have life dependency burden, have a young population, and have 41% of the children who cannot read or write. Or you can't have such high levels of infant mortality and maternal mortality cases. And therefore, one of the learning lessons of ease of doing business was that this year we are doing competition among states on learning outcomes and health outcomes. And we'll put that in public domain. Learning outcomes and health outcomes, and let people of this country know which states are performing well and which states are performing badly. So one of the key things to my mind is that make India easy, simple, and this in many ways is what Mr. A.T. Shroff had dreamt of, that government's role should be minimal, private sector's role is important, and that government should act as a facilitator, catalyst, and that is what we are doing in many of these ways. So first is, to my mind, the first key challenge for India to transform India is to make India extremely easy, simple, and do away with a lot of rules, regulation, procedures. You need to completely do business process re-engineering of government in many ways. The second key thing is that we are living in a globalized world. Because we are living in a globalized world, products get innovated somewhere, they get designed somewhere, they get manufactured somewhere, they get assembled somewhere. It's important that in a globalized world, India must become a very integral part of the global supply chain. And you can't grow rapidly if you're a closed economy. So we've opened up our economy in the last 2 years in a very big way. We've opened up India's defense, we've opened up India's construction sector, we've opened up India's insurance, pension funds, railways, all these sectors have been, e-commerce, all these sectors have been opened up for foreign direct investment. And India today is actually one of the most open economies of the world. Many Indians don't realize this, but we are the most open economy of the world, and in the last 2 years our FDI, foreign direct investment, has grown by 53% at a point of time when globally across the world foreign direct investments have fallen by 16%. And we are today the #1 destination, beating China in foreign direct investment. We receive more FDI than China does, and our FDI has grown in a very remarkable manner. And therefore, the more you open, the more pressure FDI will come in, and FDI puts pressure on domestic industry, it puts pressure in terms of technology, and therefore, your local industry will also evolve and grow over a period of time. The third critical challenge to my mind is to create an ecosystem for young people to grow and evolve and do their own entrepreneurship. I think one of the key things that has been done is to create an ecosystem for young startups in India. We have in India, India is the third best ecosystem in the world today. We have close to about 19,000 startups. Their valuation is in the region of 75 billion, but I envisage that by 2024-25, we'll have about 100, close to about 100,000 startups. From 20,000, we'll take it to that level, and I think the valuation will cross about 500 billion by that period. So we've ensured that for startups, you don't have to get into the process of getting approvals. You can get an approval on a mobile app. There are no taxes for 3 years. We've ensured that there's no Inspector Raj. We've done away with all inspections of any kind for startups. So we've tried to create an ecosystem where we support these startups, and those who take off, we've created a fund of funds which will assist and support them so that many more startups, many venture funds can come in, many startups can grow, and this startup movement is happening in a very big way. And actually, it's not just that Flipkart and Snapdeal are taking on Amazon of the world here, despite Amazon putting in a lot of resources into this country, but the startup movement has grown much beyond this, and it's happening, a lot of very unique things are happening in the world of education, in the world of health, in social innovation, in agriculture, and so on. And just to give you one example, there's a young girl called Pranshu Bhandari who started a startup called Culture Alley, and she In the last 1 year, she ran an app called Hello English, and that has actually, she's taught 9 million Indians how to speak English. She realized that the interest was not in learning Mandarin or Japanese, but to teach people English, and 9 million Indians were taught English by her. If you look at health sector, there's some remarkable startups. Conscio Medical, for instance, does a unique amount of work in the field of stool management, and this is something which people don't talk about. But they innovated an adapter which actually enables you to manage stool problems in a very hygienic manner. And Conscio Medical actually, their technology is today being taken over by All India Institute of Medical Sciences, Apollo, Fortis, all the top hospitals across the world. And that's a problem which impacts about 100 million people across the world and 16 million people in India. So Conscio Medical, or look at someone like Practo. And Practo today put together about almost, 15,000 doctors with all patients across every single problem. You can get access to doctors online, get yourself treated. It's a unique medium which has been built up, and Practo is a remarkable health startup. And or look at a startup like Portia, started by a women entrepreneur. And Portia today has given jobs to close to about 8,000, 9,000 people who provide help and assistance to people who suffer at home. And Portia has created jobs, which provided health assistance to vast number of Indians based on some of the best treatments from across the world at home. So these are people who've created jobs, they've provided technology. Or look at a startup like in the field of social innovation. And in the field of social innovation, when the Madras floods happened, in Chennai the floods happened, the state government was not able to provide help and assistance to those who were distressed. And they could not provide food packets. And it was Social Cops, a young startup, which came to the help and assistance of the Tamil Nadu government and was able to track people who were impacted and provide them more food packets at different places. So almost about 25,000 people were assisted through Social Cops. And therefore, a lot of work is happening in the field of social innovation. But a lot of work is also happening in our campuses. Look at a startup like InShorts. I don't know how many of you heard of InShorts. InShorts gives news in 60 words without any opinion. There's no Arnab Goswami there who's giving opinion. There's just plain information. And in 60 words, he gives you plain information. And today, it has 1 billion page views, and 5 million downloads every day. The InShorts today is it's done by one of our dropouts from IIT Delhi. Or look at a company called Ether Energy, which came out of IIT Chennai campus. IIT Chennai campus, young entrepreneurs work with their staff members to create Ether. They're doing a new scooter called S340, which is an electrical scooter. And the fact, while they are in IIT campus, they started their production in Bangalore. And this is completely smart scooter, electric smart scooter, which they are doing. Or Planes technology, which has created robotic for our petroleum companies. You don't have to do anything manually. Underground work is all done by robots. So vast number of areas where startups have done some unique work. And more than men, women have done some very unique work. So I gave you this example of Meena Ganesh, who runs Portia, which is unique. But I'll give you the example of Shanti Mohan, who runs Let's Venture. And what Shanti Mohan has done is in Bangalore to put together 18,000 investors from across the world. And she has 18,000 investors from across the world, and she has about 15,000. Any startup can access them, give information, and therefore these investors then go and finance all the startups in India. And that's Let's Venture, which has supported. So women are doing some very unique work. I gave you the example of Pransh Bhandari. So there's a completely new ecosystem of startups. Many of us who belong to my generation don't realize this, but there's a different energy, vibration, and dynamism in India's young people. And this, we need to take that energy, vibration. And these are people who are not dependent on government. So we need to provide greater impetus so that these people continue to grow and flourish, and government is kept at a distance. And therefore, this is a very, very important thing that is happening in India. The fourth point I want to make is that Actually, in the last 4 to 5 years, a lot of innovation is happening from India. And close to about 1,400 multinational corporations have relocated their global innovation centers to Bangalore and Hyderabad. And many of these companies, whether it's IBM, Cisco, Microsoft, or even a company like John Deere or all the top pharmaceutical companies, they've taken their global innovation centers out of their headquarters of their companies. Multinational corporations always have their global innovation centers and R&D with their head office. But that has been relocated all to Bangalore and Hyderabad, and all these companies are actually innovating for the rest of the world from India. So India has become the innovation center. So if you look at Microsoft Bing, it was innovated in India. If you look at John Deere's 60 HP tractor, it was innovated in India. If you look at Honeywell's electrocharger, it was innovated in India. If you look at the surgical tool of Medtronic, it was innovated in India. If you look at the ECG machine which GE sells for $1,500 in India, the same machine they make for $20,000 in the United States of America. In India, they make it at about $1,800, and it enables them to do an ECG for just $1. In the United States of America, they charge $20 for that. In India, they are able to do this because of great combination of innovation, entrepreneurship, and skill. They are able to do it for just $1. So India has, in many ways, become the center for global innovation right from Bangalore and Hyderabad, and this we need to spread from Bangalore, Hyderabad, Pune. We need to spread it to Gurgaon. We need to spread it to many other places so that India's momentum of doing innovation for the rest of the world continues. So the fifth point I want to make is that this, in my mind, is a very major challenge for India, is the challenge of urbanization. And in the next 3 decades, we'll see close to 350 million people getting into the process of urbanization. But if you go by the latest McKinsey study, by 2050, you will have 700 million Indians getting into the process of urbanization. 700 million Indians means that every minute as I speak here today, there are 30 Indians who move from rural to urban areas. 700 million Indians means that by 2050, the challenge is that we'll have to create close to 2.5 Americas to be able to survive. And if you're not able to do this, let me assure you, ladies and gentlemen, that every single city of India will become a slum. And therefore, you need to do very innovative and sustainable urbanization. When the West was urbanizing, and the process of urbanization has ended across America, it's ended across Europe, it's nearing its completion in China, but in India, it has just begun. It has just begun, and we will do more urbanization in the next 5 decades than what we've done in the last 5,000 years. And therefore, the challenge for India is that when West urbanized, when the western part of the world was urbanizing, land, gas, and water were all cheaply available. Because they were cheaply available, you could live in New Jersey, travel to New York, you could guzzle gas. Americans made cities for cars and not for people. The American car companies bought over the railway companies and destroyed them so that cars could sell. They created cities like Atlanta, where 98.2% of the people travel by cars. Nobody travels by public transport there. So Americans have made cities, the most polluting cities, which are made for cars. Now, when we are urbanizing, when the process of urbanization has ended across them, when we are urbanizing, land, gas, and water are all very scarce commodities. You will not get land, thanks to Mr. Jairam Ramesh's land acquisition bill. You will not get water, you will not get, gas. These are all scarce commodities. And therefore, the challenge for India is, if we copy the Western model, if India was to copy the Western model of urbanization, you will need 4 planet Earth. 4 planet Earth. You don't have 4 planet Earth. You have only 1 planet. And therefore, if India needs to do very innovative and very sustainable urbanization. And the challenge for India is that if it is able to do very creative and sustainable urbanization, it will create a model for the rest of the world, which can follow this model. And it is important for India to do it on account of its commitment for sustainable development goals, on account of its commitment for the Paris climate action, where we are committed that we will undertake very radical reduction in terms of pollution. And this is required that we need to do very innovative and sustainable urbanization. So it's important to understand this because we are sitting in Mumbai. Cities actually account for just 3% of the earth landmass. Cities account for about 55% of the total people live in cities. But by 2030, 75% of the people will live in cities. Cities account for almost 80% of the global GDP. 80% of the global GDP comes from cities. But cities also account for 82% of the CO2 emissions. So, the global growth, cities are centers of growth, they are centers of creativity, they are centers of dynamism, and therefore all the wealth gets created in cities. And India must create cities, India must manage its cities better before they become slum, and India must do new urbanization. A lot of new urbanization will happen through this. This is the first government which is talking about urbanization through its 100 Smart Cities program, because India has been a very reluctant urbanizer. We've not had any politician who came from urban areas as member of parliament. It's really the first time, before independence we had C. Rajgopalachari, we had many, Rajendra Prasad was the mayor, C. Rajgopalachari was the mayor, Motilal Nehru was the mayor of Allahabad. But post-independent, we had no politician who were mayors. This is the first time that you had a mayor in your, Mr. Fadnavis is the first chief minister who has been a mayor of a city, actually. So, focus has to be on cities, and cities must create wealth. If India has to grow at 9 to 10%, cities will become one of the key drivers of growth. So how we manage our process of urbanization will be one of the biggest challenges which India will be confronted with. The next point I want to make is that it will be very difficult for India to grow at rapid rates till women don't play a very major role in India's growth story. India's a country where, if you look at India's GDP, only 17% of India's GDP is contributed by women. Only 17%. In terms of numbers, it's 24%. Even in sub-Saharan Africa, the women's contribution is 39%, and the global average is about 40 to 41%. So if you are able to take women's contribution, and India will have to bring in gender parity in its growth process. If you are not able to bring gender parity in your growth process, it will be very difficult for India to grow at those rates, because women's contribution, if you are able to bring gender parity, you will add by 2030, you will add close to $700 billion US simply by focusing on women's growth. And therefore, gender parity is very, very critical to my mind. And the women will play a very major and critical role. I'm saying this because if India is to grow, if our objective is to grow, we must understand this, that in 1975, India and China were at the same level of growth, exactly the same level of growth. Both were reluctant urbanizers. China's political process was based on its peasantry. They used to focus on peasantry, but in 1975, and in India, all through post-independent era, we focused only on rural development. We did not have any scheme for urban development. The Jawaharlal Nehru Urban Renewal Mission 5 years back was the first scheme which came for urban development. But in 1975, China broke away from it. And China broke away from it and said, we'll do new urbanization. They went and they created about close to 140 new cities. They grew at 10% plus. 10% plus for 3 decades. Now, if you grow at 10% plus, you double your GDP in 7 years' time. 7 years' time, you're doubling your GDP. So they kept growing 7 years, kept compounding. The compounding power of growth was enormous. And therefore, they have grown so rapidly. Now, if India's ambition is to grow, your per capita income, India's per capita income is 1,580 right. The difference between 7% growth and 10% is so huge. We are growing at about 7.5%. If you grow at 7%, by 2032, you will take your per capita income to 4,000 US dollars. From 1,580, you will take it to 4,000. But if you grow at 10%, you will take it to 6,800 US dollars. 6,000, that is the difference you will make. And by that time, if you grow at 10% by 2032, year after year, there will be no poverty in India by 2030. No poverty in India by 2032. You would have lifted all your population above the poverty line. So, to my mind, there is no substitute but to have single-minded pursuit of growth. Now, single-minded pursuit of growth also means several things. I talked about education, I talked about health. Nutrition is very important. You can't have a young population with 39% of the children being stunted. And therefore, nutrition is very important. And unless we don't focus on social sectors, it will be very difficult for India to rapidly grow at those rates. Now, what are the challenges for India to grow? You know, I said that these are critical things, these are critical factors, and it is important that we grow in this manner. And I think, first and foremost, if India is to grow at those rates for a very long period of time, India must become our policy framework must be extremely predictable, it must be extremely consistent, and there must be clarity of policies. You know, and this clarity of policy must be there for a very long period of time, because India's policy regime quite often lacks predictability, lacks consistency, and lacks clarity over a period of time. In the last 2 years, for the first time, we've tried to bring in some predictability and consistency of policy, and therefore, my belief is that we should be able to continue to focus on this predictability, consistency, and clarity of policies, particularly in our tax areas. In tax, it's very important that if private sector comes in, if you are going to grow over a long period of time, you need absolutely predictable, consistent, and clear policy regime over a long period of time. Number two, it's important that to understand that no country in the world has grown for long periods of time on the back of foreign direct investment alone. India may be doing that right now, but if India wants to grow at long periods of time, it's very important to grow on the back of your own industries. So there's a need for making India's enterprise, India's companies, and India's entrepreneurs and top companies of India to invest in India. And today, it's important to bring back the spirit, the animal spirit of revival of investing in India for Indian enterprise. Now, we've created overcapacity, but there are several issues we are confronted with. We are confronted with an issue of non-performing assets in commercial banks. We need to clean up that act of non-performing assets, and we need to make our banks extremely dynamic in performance, and therefore there's a need to bring in professional management in our banks and clean up the non-performing assets so that credit offtakes from a financial institution increases. The credit offtake is very low right now. And therefore there's a huge need for driving this energy of ensuring that investments take off in India. And if India has to grow over a long period, China was not made by only FDI, a lot of Chinese companies were invested. The next point I want to make is that, it's important that we bring in factor market reforms. We've done reforms across several areas, but it will be very difficult for India to grow for long periods without factor market reforms, and that is labor and land. Our labor laws are totally outdated. Almost 79% of our employment is coming from small and medium enterprises. Unless we don't plan big and large in size and scale, nobody produces only for the domestic market. Indians must think of penetrating global markets, and therefore you need to plan big in size and scale. And for that, labor laws remain quite outdated and antiquated. They were made in a different socialist eras of 1970s. They are not designed for India growing at 9 to 10%, and therefore each state needs to reform its land laws and its labor laws. If you want to grow and expand in infrastructure, if you want to grow and expand in many of these areas, liberalizing the labor laws is critical. The next point, according to me, which is very important, is that productivity efficiency is important. India still remains a rather inefficient economy. At the peak of its growth, Japan was growing, almost 39% of its contribution to GDP came from productivity efficiencies. Productivity efficiency is critical, and when you carry out factor market reforms, productivity efficiency will improve. And therefore, Indians must learn to benchmark themselves against international benchmarking. And therefore, Japan grew at 39% productivity accounted for its growth. But when Korea was growing, productivity efficiency accounted for almost 42%. But when China grew for a long period of time, productivity efficiency was accounting for almost 79% of its increase in GDP. And therefore, productivity efficiency is very critical for India. I mean, it's not that we are producing more, it's not that we are selling more, but it's how well and how better productivity are we doing. And therefore, across all sectors of our manufacturing, across all sectors of our production, we need to bring in productivity efficiency, and that, to my mind, is very critical. The next point I want to make is that if India has to grow at those rapid rates, infrastructure to world-class standards is important. And without top-class infrastructure, it will be very difficult for India to grow. You know, we've seen some really good infrastructure being created. Mumbai Airport, Delhi Airport, these are all top-class infrastructure. We are creating a lot of roads, a lot of infrastructure is actually happening in the field. In the last 2 years, our road network, the total amount of road work contracted has grown by 42%. Railways, it's grown by about 79%. A lot of work is happening in railways. If you look at civil aviation sector, a lot of new airports have been created across tier 2, tier 3 cities. Our civil aviation sector is growing at about 21%. Our power sector has done very well. Our coal production has gone up very rapidly. But all this is happening right now on the back of public sector investment. Public sector investment is driving investment. But in the long run, it will be very difficult for government to keep spending money in infrastructure. Two very important things. One is that we need to bring back private-public partnership back to the table, which has fallen apart. And unless and until there's proper risk sharing and private people are able to invest and private people are able to create wealth from infrastructure creation, it will be very difficult for India to grow at those rates. So a lot of our contractual agreements need to be very well prepared, very well structured, and a lot of projects need to be de-risked by taking approvals up front and putting them out into the market. So in the long run, world-class infrastructure with private sector participation is very important for India. Now the government has come out with a vast number of new initiatives. It's come out with Make in India, it's come out with Skill India, it's done the Digital India program. And I want to make this point that it's in all these programs, the basic thrust of it is that technology must be used to leapfrog. And it will be very difficult for India to grow without using technology to make a quantum jump. India is the only country in the world which has 1 billion mobile. India is the only country in the world with 1 billion biometrics. By 2025, we will be the only country in the world with 1 billion smartphones. 1 billion smartphones. 1 billion biometrics. And we'll be the only country in the world to have the universal payment interface. And what the universal payment interface does, I don't know how many of you have tried this, it's got a backward linkage to all the banks. So actually using your biometric, you can do all your transactions, all this, what the rest of the world has done, using debit card, credit card, ATMs, physical banks, POS machines, all of this will become redundant. All of this, India can, by using the universal payment interface with biometrics, all this can become redundant. And therefore, universal payment interface is like a highway without any toll taxes, anywhere, no blockage. Straight away do transaction. And it is possible for India to make every man, every woman today a walking ATM using his biometric. And therefore, India is on the edge of a very big technological revolution. And actually, we have the potential that by 2025, India can become a totally cashless, totally paperless society using technology. And therefore, this technological jump holds the key to India's success. And we must go all out to embed our cities, our process of urbanization with technology. We must go all out to make India a completely digital nation. We must go all out to make India a cashless and a paperless society. And we must go all out really to push the spread of internet all across India. That will really transform India. And many of the successes of Mr. Modi's programs, Make in India, Digital India, etc., are dependent on one single thing, on how fast and how rapidly we can spread internet across the country. And to my mind, this is really holds the key to the success of India's growth process. The last point I want to make is that, many things we do it, it'll be very difficult for India to be a 21st century nation growing at 10% as long as your institutions are of 19th century. So we need to transform our institutions. Our transformation of institutions is important. You can't have there's a huge imbalance of doctors. Your Medical Council of India is totally antiquated. Your UGC is antiquated. Your AICTE, which governs technical education, they are all designed for 19th century and not for 21st century India. So therefore you need to redesign your institutions. And I think that work is something which is work in progress. We in Niti Aayog have restructured a completely new Medical Commission of India, which is in public domain. We've asked for public comments to comment. We are next going to move on to UGC and AICTE. So transforming of institutions is important. And unless we don't create dynamic institutions, it will be very difficult for India to grow. That's a very major challenge for India. We need to create dynamic institutions of tomorrow. And while India is growing at 7.5%, my belief is, as the Deputy Prime Minister of Singapore, who gave the Niti lecture last month said, India is taking too many singles. We need to hit a lot of fours and a lot of sixers for India to grow at 9 to 10%. Without fours and sixers, it will be very difficult for India to grow. And the last thing I want to say is that you can have any institution, you can create any political governance, you can bring in any structural changes, but at the end of it all, it's about the people of India. And unless the people of India are not determined and are not absolutely, they don't transform. You can't expect the government to do Swachh Bharat as long as you keep creating dirt and filth all around you. So the people of India must become very aware. You can't have smart cities without smart Indians. Every single Indian must become smart, and every single Indian must believe in this, have the optimism to make India grow. And unless and until that doesn't happen, a lot of this growth process that we are talking about challenges, about transformation, will not happen till every single Indian doesn't become a very responsible Indian. And I will just end by this 14th century Indian writer. He was a Muslim. He wrote, his ancestry was Turkish. He wrote in Persian, and that was Amir Khusro, and writing on the 14th century when Delhi and India was at the peak of power, and its zenith contributed almost 60% of the global growth at that point of time. And though he was a Turkish ancestry and wrote in Persian language, he was a Muslim. He said that he's counted himself to be the luckiest man alive to have been born in India and to have India as his motherland. And of the 14th century India, he wrote how exhilarating is the atmosphere of India. There cannot be a better teacher than the way of life of its people. For if any foreigner comes by, he will have to ask for nothing, because the Indians teach him how to smile like a flower. And how exhilarating is the atmosphere of India because of the Indians. And therefore, if India has to grow at 9 to 10%, we'll have to recreate that creative spirit of 19th century or 14th century, where every Indian who felt proud about his country and created that exhilarating atmosphere. Without that, it will be very difficult for India to grow at 9 to 10% and transform. Thank you very much.
About the scrapping of old laws, and now India virtually coming by 1st of April new statute scrapping all VAT and sales tax in the country. So, do you have any intervention in the GST to make it simplified, because it seems to the public that it will be complicated and services will be more costly? What is your opinion?
How do you know that it will be complicated and services more expensive?
The news which you will be reading the paper.
So progress. It is work in progress because the way the GST Council is structured, 1/3 is Government of India, 2/3 is states. Anything to pass in the GST Council, you can't do it without arriving at a consensus. And I think a lot of discussion is taking place. So to say that it is complicated, it will affect common man at this stage is very premature. I think the government's intention is to make it absolutely simple. Government's intention is that we should have a GST which is efficient. Government's intention is to have a GST which has very few exemptions. There should be no exemption. So the more simple, the more efficient, the more moderate your tax rate, the better it will be for the country to grow. But that is still work in progress. The final decision will be taken by the GST Council and not by you and me, or not by the newspapers. So don't go by newspaper. If you start going by newspaper and electronic media, then GST will not be able to pass through the GST Council. So I think we should wait. And patience is a virtue. Indians do not have patience, but we should have patience.
Not touched upon 3 points. First is when you have talked about jobs. Here in India, there is a lack of social security and total lack of focus to jobs. Now you see in US, they see the job situation as is monitored on a weekly basis, monthly basis. Even if you say they are going to increase the interest rates or US rate, they look at the job market, how many jobs there is. Here there is absolute lack of focus because there is no social security. You don't have a job, the government doesn't give you anything. Second thing you notice about is all pervasive corruption, every field of government, judiciary, income tax, police, municipality, everywhere, all pervasive corruption. India cannot grow without seriously controlling this corruption. And thirdly, lastly, the lack of accountability in government service. Once a person gets a job in government service, at 25 to the age of retire 58, nobody gets taken. So total there is need to have a sort of hire and fire policy here in government service, accountability is what.
I think three very important points have been made, and I think these are issues of very major concern. First, let me touch on the issue of corruption. I think it's important. A lot of corruption in India used to come from the top, and a lot of corruption in India happens because of political reasons, and then it spreads to administrative systems and so on. But one of the things about this government, at least in the last 2 years, I've seen that there is no top-level corruption. In fact, there have been no incidents of top-level corruption at all, the top. And therefore, my belief is, and I'm convinced about it, that if there's no corruption at the top level, then it will spread to the states, it will spread all over, and slowly corruption will get knocked out in India. And therefore, that's why I believe that the scheme for black money declaration was also a very good scheme. It's achieved a high level of success. But a lot of corruption used to start from the top, which has been totally eliminated now under the present government. And that's a very good thing. The second point you raised was about jobs. And this, to my mind, is the most important thing for India, is to grow by creating jobs. Because if you don't create jobs, you'll have a lot of disaffection. Now, there are challenges in this. One is the challenge that you're also heading for intelligent manufacturing. You're going to have smart manufacturing, what you call as manufacturing 4.0. Everything will get digitized. So it will be very difficult to create jobs. But India is a very large country. One is that you can have smart manufacturing in Gujarat and Maharashtra. But many states have textiles, gems and jewelry, food processing. So government has taken a series of measures. We've just announced a very major package on textiles. It's a 45,000 crore package for textiles. We've announced a very major package for revival of the construction industry where money was held up, where arbitration has gone in their favor. We've said that without waiting for the final verdict, 75% of that money will be paid for clearances that used to the bank. Now these are very major packages which the government has announced. Similarly, I think each state needs to work in what if India is to grow at 9 to 10%, you need 12 champion states to grow at 12%. And each state must do it on their core competency. Look at a state like Kerala. Why should it not it has driven all its job creation not through manufacturing, not through textiles, but on travel and tourism. And my belief is that in the next 5 years, we can create 10 million jobs from tourism. It's a huge sector for growth, travel and tourism. Why should we not tap it in a very, very big way? So I think a lot of sectors which are opening and a lot of sectors where we can create jobs in due course. And the third point that you talked about was, you said about corruption, jobs, and you said about accountability. Now, everyone is accountable. I tell you, in India, the government officer is the most accountable man. Let me tell you, he's accountable to his bosses, his administrative bosses, he's accountable to the political bosses, he's accountable to the chief vigilance commissioner, he's accountable to the central accountant, to the CAG, he's accountable to the CBI. He's accountable to too many people.
But he can't be removed.
No, he can't. He's accountable to too many people.
But that's in theory, sir.
But he can't be removed.
No, that's what I'm saying. See, you need good governance. Good politics must become good governance. In India, there was good politics was not good governance. Don't keep blaming government officers alone. You need stability of policy, you need stability of institutions, you need several things to happen for government to also deliver. And therefore, my belief is that if you think that government will also work like private sector, hire and fire, government will find it very difficult to deliver. You have to have faith in your people who are delivering. You need to boost their morale. You can't demoralize everybody. My belief is many. You need to encourage people, officers also. It's the minute you start doing this and saying that everybody will be hired and fired, let me tell you, government will come to a standstill. It will be very difficult for government to work. So government needs accountability, but government also needs to pad and raise the morale of its officers.
Sir, the point you made, I differ to some extent. I go to a government babu. He says a paper notarized नहीं, notarized करके लाओ. मैंने बताया कि भाई notary is no more required. It's the law of the land. He said, I don't care. As long as I am here, you bring a notarized paper. So either he is not educated enough about the current rules and regulations, or he just wants to throw his weight around and make me run about. So he has to be better educated about his
So
duties.
what I'm saying is that, see, first of all, I don't have a solution to all the problems of India. You are asking me to solve all of India's problems. I don't have a solution. I am a manager. I do my job and I want to do it well. Now, I personally believe that the change has started from the top, and I think that movement must spread. It must spread to the states, and slowly, we should have good governance all over. So. थोड़ा टाइम लगेगा, but there will be changes in due course. And I think all of us will have to play a role. All of us will have to play a role.
Can I answer?
Last question, please. Let's respond to these issues, not this trivial issue.
Sir, first of all, compliments for a very holistic perspective on the current scenario, and I was especially glad to notice your last point about institutions, because as an economist I know that the recent growth literature has a major role, has always said that a major role in a country's growth over long term has been played by quality and availability of its institutions. So that point is better. My question is that whereas we see institutions like Reserve Bank of India, SEBI, and many economic institutions, taking up the reform mantle, with your experience of working in center and across various states, do the political institutions such as parliament, legislatures, and down the line, do they offer some kind of, across parties, do they offer some kind of confidence and hope that they will be aligned with the economic institutions as far as the reform progress is concerned?
No. So, I've worked in government for 38 years. Now, I personally feel that, and I worked in the state, I worked with communist regime, I worked with Congress regime, I worked with everyone.
Yeah.
But, I feel that in the last 2 years, there is a very clear vision that we must build institutions, everything must be policy driven, and there must be 110% integrity of decisions. So I feel very confident that the present government, is determined to bring in a lot of institutional changes and is wanting to drive policy changes and make things easy and simple. The solution to many of these problems which have been raised here, and actually that is the vision which A.D. Shroff had, that government had permitted all walks of life, everything government had got into. Government needs to get away from many areas to make things easy for the citizens of India to create wealth. And that, I think, we are on that track now, to make things easy, simple. Everything is getting digitized, everything is technology driven, and therefore,
I think this is penetrating the
this is
states and decentralized
because
levels.
of this competition. So you will, over a period of time, see improvement in learning outcomes, you will see improvement in health outcomes. We are doing a separate competition among states on water management. Because there will be no water left. Actually, the northern part of India, Haryana, Delhi, Punjab, they are digging out poison. We are leaving nothing for future generations. We are turning them into deserts. So we are doing a huge competition on better management of water across. And unless and until we don't challenge the states, things will not improve. See, the point is that center is not responsible for everything. It's the state governments also. So we have to. And today, what has the government of India done? Government of India said 42% of the total revenues will give to the state government. Now you are giving resources, but you must assess the outcomes. Yeah. So, one last question.
So good evening. Good evening. Thank you for this. In this the form of a lecture and not addressing from that podium. Second thing, first time we have had a question.
That's a good innovation or a bad innovation?
Excellent. Second thing, it was first time we had an interaction question answer session, which I should thank you. When I heard you, I am reminded of Mahatma Gandhi's inspiration from the book Ruskin Unto the Last. If, as you said, we follow it in letter and spirit, India can be transformed. My only query is with the war clouds with Pakistan and all our money, how will it affect the development of economic progress? Will it dampen it? That is one question. Second thing, with the black money declaration of about 75,000 crore and 45% coming in, will that boost the economy or will it get siphoned off as we see? And the third last point is, Vijay Mallya and the NPAs of the bank, which are large amount, we can't recover it. If we can manage to recover it, would it help in improving the economy?
On the security issue and wars and all, I think these issues are best left to the Prime Minister to handle, and handling it in a very professional manner. And our army is doing it in a very, very, very professional manner. So I think we are in safe hands. We are totally in safe hands. We are totally in safe hands. And I think I am not equipped to answer on the nitty-gritty of it. But my belief is that we are handling this issue of terrorism. We are handling this issue of what we are confronted with from across the border in a professional manner. And and I think we should just leave it to the Prime Minister to handle that issue. The second issue you talked about was about black money which has been deposited, and I think which has been under this declaration scheme. All this money, as the Finance Minister said, will go into the Consolidated Fund of India and will be used for various purposes, including creation of infrastructure. One of the challenges was that India is trying to be a very disciplined country in financial matters. We said we will not cross our fiscal deficit. But getting this extra money will enable you to push your infrastructure. You need to, because private investment is not picked up, we need to push roads, you need to create jobs. So unless you don't push for infrastructure, how will you create jobs? So getting this additional 35,000-40,000 will help us to push that. And the third point was about Vijay Mallya. So my belief is that there are many Vijay Mallyas in this country, and we need to ensure that and I mentioned this briefly, Now, one of the challenges is that non-performing assets need to be cleaned up. We need to ensure that our banks are able to revive flow of credit to the private sector. And the government is taking several measures. I think the RBI is taking several measures on that to revive financial institutions, public sector lending, so that lending can take off in a very big way. And private sector investment into the Indian economy can take off. Because at the end of the day, it will be very difficult for India to grow without private sector. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Very scintillating lecture. And this Amitabh Kant has covered as many issues as possible, given a very bright view of things. At the same time, you can see that the myriad issues which this country is faced with. The picture on the whole which comes out is highly optimistic. And what it calls for is, I think, very serious collaboration between all sectors, private and public. Particularly, I think the one issue which he raised with starting with Egypt, that our democratic dividend can become a democratic disaster if we don't grow faster than what we are doing. But just saying that we should grow at 8 or 10% is not going to happen. It needs a lot of work, it needs a lot of cooperation from all areas. And I think he has raised issues of innovation, social overheads. I think that's a very important issue. We always keep on talking about infrastructure. Infrastructure doesn't only mean bridges and roads. It means a lot on education and health. This is where we have been badly lacking. The other thing is urbanization. He said we are hardly 30% urbanized. We are going to become 50% urbanized in another 20 years' time. And unless smart cities come up, unless the development hereafter is on more methodical, modern lines, we are not going to get to 8 to 10%. At the moment, I think our modest target is 8%. Even if we keep to 8%, we'll get much further than what we have got in the past. I was reading the other day Abdul Kalam's book on Vision of India 2020. And what he has said in 2020, we are very far, far away from it. Because in between, we stopped to grow. So I think what he has stated is that while we are on the way, let's catch up fast. I'll give you one instance, for instance, how fast we have come up. When I was a student at Ann Arbor, Michigan, and went to the Ford factory, they said they made 2 million tons of steel. And I said, oh, Tatas in India make 2 million tons of steel. They said, who the hell are Tatas? We've never heard of them. 2 million tons of steel and under one cover. Today, India is among the 3 largest producers of steel in the country. Next year, it will be producing 100 million tons of steel, from 2 million tons 60 years ago. And perhaps next to China, will be the largest manufacturer. Similarly in cement and many other areas, generic pharmaceuticals, in two-wheelers. So I think we are getting up there, but we have not got up fast enough. And the points which he has raised, what we need to tackle, they're all well known. What we need to do is action. And this is where I think the present government is doing its best, but is not getting enough cooperation from the states. It's nice to know from Mr. Kant that the states are also competing with each other in terms of ease of doing business and the speed at which they are growing. The way they put in advertisements in the newspapers of how attractive they are for as investment destinations and so on and so forth. So I think the future is bright. India is certainly a bright spot. Only thing is we need to do more faster, having our targets in focus, and implementation is the order of the day. Unless we implement all our schemes, they remain on paper. And this is where I think very enlightened, far-sighted administrators like Mr. Kant can play a very useful role, and he's playing it. So Mr. Kant is a very enlightening actor. We hope you put all the suggestions you've given as much in practice as you can possibly do in terms of energizing your colleagues in acting with the same alacrity which you have displayed on the stage this evening. Thank you very much for a magnificent lecture.